Hello everyone, I'm Rick and thanks for joining me. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That'll really help the channel grow. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm going to assume that you like my content, so please give me a like. Today we're looking at an entry-level DAC and headphone amp from SMSL's Lin 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 sub-brand, the $109 DS200. Let's take a closer look. An aluminum chassis lends to a quality feeling product, but the choice of orange plastic accents do the opposite. However, a very nice touch are that this plate and this plate are actually glass and not acrylic, which is wonderful because I hate to see acrylic as it scratches so easily. This glass will prevent that. This orange button on the upper left side is for power, and a long press will power us on. Short taps will cycle through the 4 inputs, and we have coaxial, optical, Bluetooth, and USB. There's also 2 more tiny indicators up on top, and those are for DSD as well as MQA. A long press on the power button turns the unit back off. And you do, if I cover here, have this little red indicator that tells you the unit is powered in. With my lights, it's not very visible. I'll power the unit back on. Moving on down, we have what SMSL calls a mood light here. And frankly, SMSL, sometimes less is more. I think this is totally unnecessary. It adds 0 to this DAC, I believe. Under that, we have our 2 headphone outs. The first on 3.5mm TRS and the second on 4.4mm Pentacon. Going down the middle, we have a couple of switches, and the first orange selector switch is for our output. Here we can choose between line output and headphone output. And on the second one, this is our headphone gain, and we can choose between low gain and high gain. And finally, over here on the right side, we have a 47mm fader that controls our volume. Moving to the rear, from top to bottom, we have a pair of USB-C inputs, and the first is for auxiliary power, and this port is internally connected to the data port. So on a computer, you can just use the one data port, but if you're connecting this DAC to your phone, then you will want to connect the data to the phone and power to the 5-volt auxiliary here, so the DAC doesn't pull too much power from your phone and possibly damage it. Moving down, the Bluetooth antenna, a Toslink optical in, digital coaxial in, and finally a set of line outs on RCA. The RCAs do output up to 2 volts, and the headphone outputs up to 400 milliwatts at 16 ohms, 200 at 32 ohms. On the inside, we have the main board with the DACs, the LDO regulators, the control chips, and the XMOS processor. And a ribbon cable connects the input and volume on a smaller daughter board that's mounted on the front of the unit. And there is a lot of empty space in this unit. More on this later. On to my listening impressions. I tested the Lin 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 DS200 as a DAC first. Line out to my preamp, amp, and speakers, and compared it to 3 other entry-level DACs from SMSL, the SU1, PS200, and the new D1. The DS200 sounded closest to the SU1, and I'd say a touch more spacious, and a little fuller in the bass. Although I would say the PS200 and the D1 are a step above. I'll have my review on the D1 soon. Next I moved to headphone listening with a pair of Sivka Robins, and at $150, I'd say it's an appropriate pairing for this DAC and headphone amp. Here I compared with the X-Duo XQ50 Pro 3, as well as another Lin Lin Lin, the M20. Both the Lin Lin Lins were quite a bit more spacious and natural sounding than the X-Duo. And while the Lin Lin Lins don't extend as high as the X-Duos, their layering and soundstage gains are impressive. Between the DS200 and the slightly more expensive M20 at $129, the quad Cirrus 43131 setups here produce a soundstage that's just a touch larger than the dual 43131s that are in the DS200. For sound quality alone, I would suggest that you spend the extra $20 and go for the M20 if you only need a DAC for desktop use. Because unlike the DS200, the M20 only has a USB in and no SPDIF soundboard, which is another good thing that I like about the DS200. Apart from its low price and great sound quality, the flexibility with the other inputs. The final thing that I noted that I did like with the DS200 versus the M20 was the fader. Initially I didn't like the feel of it at first, but after some use, I thought it was great to give you more granularity of the volume versus the M20 stepped volumes, which at higher volumes quickly gets too loud for me. Now, just out of curiosity, I also tested a very hard to drive set of headphones, the SJY Horizon Closed Carbons. And before any comments, I do not expect anybody to use this $1,000 set of headphones on this amp. This was just out of curiosity to see if the DS200 could handle that 11 ohm planar, and it cannot. The volume levels are pretty low, and with every bass hit, you get static. Although that set of headphones is hard to drive on anything. As for the design, aesthetics are always subjective, and I don't particularly like the shape of this unit. I think the top is too small to have anything sitting on top of it. And if you recall, the inside is pretty empty. So it seems that Lin 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 chose this design intentionally for the aesthetic reasons instead of the need for space. I personally would have liked a shape closer to that of the M20, and I would have liked to keep it square and have the power button, the selector switches, and headphone outputs on the front, and then have the fader on top up here. To me, I think a fader is better to use flat versus vertical like on the DS200. So I think that's how I would have preferred it on my desk. Once again, aesthetics are subjective, and I think it's going to be one of those love it or hate it situations with this one. Overall, for the DS200's asking price, I'd say it's a nice desktop DAC with a headphone amp that's quite a bit more powerful than what you're going to get out of a 3.5mm from your computer. And it's a great entry point into better audio. But once again, if you don't need those extra SPDIF ins, spend the extra $20 and get that M20. It is worth the upgrade. And that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.